Hey there, folks. When it comes to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park, or rather the disappearances within the park, there are two specific cases that stand out and have been responsible for a lot of internet myth and legend. One, of course, is Dennis Martin, which I've covered extensively. The other is about a teenage girl named Trenny Gibson. I'm sure many people have already heard some version of her story, or at least are familiar with her name, and I have to say, much like the Dennis Martin case, I think the story of Trenny Gibson is often told poorly. The lack of significant detail is what I believe leads to the creation of myths like the feral wild people of the Smokies. These types of creations are what some people invent to fill in the gaps, so to speak, while doing it in a way that would capture the public's imagination and seemingly endless desire for mystery or the paranormal. For myself, I had some understanding of the Trenny Gibson case before investigating it, but after doing the old deep dive, I realized I didn't know the half of it. But that's what this video is for, so we can educate ourselves and go over the best available information while consulting all sources we can, and even other investigators or experts on the subject. The story and details I'm about to relay come from a variety of sources: the official Park Service investigation, newspaper articles, and the book Unsolved Disappearances in the Great Smoky Mountains by Juanita Baldwin and Esther Grubb, who did a lot of great investigative work. But later, I will also be showing you an interview I did with two authorities on the case who reveal plenty of previously unknown information. Anyway, I'm already starting to rant, so let's just get right into the disappearance of Trenny Lynn Gibson. But real quick, the holidays are just around the corner, and if you're looking to get someone a practical gift, something that they'll use every day, then I'd like to recommend the sponsor of this video, Raycon. I've talked about Raycons on this channel before, and I'm happy to be presenting this brand again, because for someone like me who likes to listen to podcasts and music while I'm out on the trail or wandering aimlessly through the woods, I have found that Raycons are genuinely superior to other brands for a variety of reasons. For starters, I like how they fit in my ear and stay in my ear despite the fact that I'm moving around a whole bunch. That alone is a necessity for someone like me. Combine that with some other little bullet points like the fact that they have active noise cancellation, they're weatherproof, and they're sweat resistant. Well, you've pretty much already ticked most of my necessary boxes when I'm looking for a good earbud. But of course, that's not all there is. With a 32-hour battery life, I don't always have to worry about putting them in the charger, but when that time inevitably comes around, it's no issue because 10 minutes of charging time yields 90 minutes of battery life. I mean, I could keep going. The sound quality is wonderful, they're quick to connect, and on top of all this, Raycons are quite affordable. You don't have to break the bank to get quality, and of course, things are only getting better with the deal that Raycon is offering for this channel. So if you want to save big for the holidays, you can go to buyraycon.com/TME today in order to get 25% off site-wide. Again, that is up to 25% off everything on Raycon's website when you go to buyraycon.com/TME. Or you can just click the link in the description below. I mean, if you're looking for a good gift to get yourself or someone else, then I highly suggest you give Raycons a try. But do it quick. The cutoff date for getting these as a holiday gift is December 15th. Trenny Lynn Gibson was a 16-year-old girl living in Knoxville, Tennessee. Her home, located on White Tower Road, was just large enough to house both of her parents and a number of siblings. Her father, Bob Gibson, was the Director of Personnel Development for Malter International Corporation, and he was also a member of the National Guard. His work often required him to be away on business for a couple of weeks every month. Her mother was Hope Gibson, who said that Trenny was close to her parents as well as her other siblings. These included an older brother, Robert Jr., who was 19 and in the military, a younger sister, Tina, who was 14, and Miracle, who was 5. Trenny was also close to the family dog, Mitzi, whom she reportedly loved dearly. Trenny attended the local Bearden High School, where despite being shy, she still had a number of friends. As the day of October 8th approached, Trenny's father was away in New Orleans on a business trip, leaving her mother as the sole parent. Again, this was a rather common occurrence in the Gibson house, and nothing was reportedly out of the ordinary in the time leading up to this event. On the day of October 8th, 1976, Trenny's class was gearing up for a planned mystery field trip to the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. But more specifically, they were planning to travel to Clingman's Dome parking lot and then go on a hike. To get there, you have to travel on the Newfound Gap Road and then make a turn onto Clingman's Dome Road. This road hugs the Appalachian Trail closely until it eventually reaches the parking lot and trailhead. At this point, they plan to hike the Forney Ridge Trail south to a location called Andrews Bald. The trail runs along the top of the steep Forney's Ridge and is roughly 3 miles round trip. Andrews Bald is essentially a high point on the ridge and a decent spot to stop and take a break. Other trails in the area lead north towards Clingman's Dome, a popular observation tower, which subsequently connects to the Appalachian Trail. These areas, however, were not intended to be part of the hike. I call this excursion a mystery field trip because none of the students or their parents knew the destination before the actual day of the trip. The journey to Andrews Bald was part of a horticulture class that Trenny was taking at Bearden High School, and it was to be led by teacher Wayne Dunlap. Mr. Dunlap would wind up being the only person chaperoning the 40 students who would end up going on this excursion. He did try to find additional chaperones, including Trenny's own mother, who apparently agreed to go at one point, only to call it off later. Despite Mr. Dunlap's best efforts, he was certainly going to have his hands full with a 40-to-1 ratio of students to adults. Trenny's mother would later state that Trenny herself had not planned on going on the field trip that morning, believing that it would be called off due to intense rain that was hitting the area. Because of this, Trenny didn't even take a jacket with her to school that day. Trenny left home wearing a blue shirt, blue and white sweatshirt, blue jeans, and a star sapphire and diamond ring. Hope Gibson drove Trenny to school that day, during which time they passed another student. Trenny asked them if the field trip was still on, and she was told that it was indeed. Mrs. Gibson dropped her daughter off at Bearden High School, then drove away, never thinking twice about the field trip that day. Fortunately for Trenny, she was able to borrow a brown plaid jacket from her friend Robert Simpson sometime that day. And yes, there are a lot of Roberts already in this story. Just for clarity, we have Robert Gibson Sr., Trenny's father, then Robert Gibson Jr., Trenny's older brother, but we also have Robert Simpson, Trenny's friend, and just to pile on to that, Robert Simpson's father, who is also named Robert Simpson. But we won't end up talking about him in this video too much. Anyway, moving on, shortly after arriving at school, the 40 students tromped onto the school bus, monitored by Mr. Dunlap. When all were aboard, he announced that their location would be the Great Smoky Mountains National Park. The students all cheered in response to the news. Mr. Dunlap laid out the plans for the day. They would drive to Clingman's Dome parking lot, then hike the trail out to Andrews Bald before returning to the bus using the same trail. Mr. Dunlap put strict rules in place that no one was to stray from the trail or take any side trails. During the hike, the students were to observe the trees and plant life that they encountered along the way. The plan was to have everyone back at the bus by 3:30 p.m. During the roughly 2-hour bus ride, Trenny sat next to her friend Robert Simpson. They talked and joked along with other students. There was never any hint that anything was amiss. The bus would arrive at Clingman's Dome parking lot around 12:30 p.m. According to Mr. Dunlap, the group left Clingman's Dome parking lot shortly after 12:30 p.m., heading towards the trail that led to Andrews Bald. Mr. Dunlap had reminded everyone to take their coats with them as the day was cold and overcast, and to remember to meet back at the bus at 3:30 p.m. The air at the time was filled with the loud talking and cackling of a group of 40 teenagers, let loose in the forests of the Smokies. A few students raced each other to Andrews Bald, running out far in front of the bulk of the group. As the party moved along and was forced to thin out along the narrow trail, they ended up breaking up into smaller groups. Given that the students were spread out, all arrived at Andrews Bald at different times. Trenny walked with her friend Robert, and both arrived safely at Andrews Bald around 1:30 p.m. After spending some time at their destination, a majority of the students decided to begin hiking back to the bus. Trenny decided to leave with this group while Robert stayed behind. It is reported that this party left Andrews Bald at around 1:50 p.m. Many students were attempting to hurry back to the bus as the weather had worsened and they were not dressed accordingly. Nobody seemed especially intent on looking at any trees or foliage. Trenny was reportedly last seen by a number of students at approximately 2:50 p.m. When everyone arrived back at the buses, the time was roughly 3:30, just as planned. As is typical, a head count was done just to make sure everyone was there. This was the point where people began to realize that Trenny was missing. Mr. Dunlap questioned his students, and a girl named Bobby Coghill came forward. She said that she was walking with Angela Beckner and Lisa Mickles when Trenny came up behind them, walking faster than they were. Bobby began walking with Trenny at that point. She said they both caught up with Scott Troy and Anita Rounds and began walking with them for about 5 minutes or so. Bobby asked if anyone was breathing hard, and Trenny said, "Yeah, everybody." Then someone suggested that they take a moment to rest. At that point, everyone stopped and sat down, except for Trenny. She said she didn't want to stop, and so she separated from the group and kept moving. Anita Rounds estimated that they were roughly half a mile or 3/4 of a mile from Klingman's Dome parking area when Trenny left them. Anita said that she was watching her and it looked as if Trenny had gone right off the trail. David Eastham came up behind her, so she turned around to look at him, but when she turned back around, Trenny was not there. They all assumed that she would be back at the bus. No student had seen Trenny after she walked into the woods around 3 p.m. Mr. Dunlap, perhaps thinking that Trenny must be back on the trail somewhere, sent a student named Danny Johnson down to Andrews Bald while he walked out towards Double Springs, a location to the northwest. Mr. Dunlap probably made this decision on the assumption that Trenny missed the turn back to the parking lot. During this time, the students were told to stay put in the parking area and maybe spend some time searching it, but never to leave the area. Danny Johnson did not find any trace of Trenny. Mr. Dunlap, however, saw tennis shoe tracks about Trenny's size on the Appalachian Trail and heading towards Double Springs Shelter. He lost the trail approximately half a mile past the intersection of the Appalachian Trail and the trails to Forney Creek and Andrews Bald. The search for Trenny begins quickly after she vanishes, and there are detailed records of how things unfolded hour by hour. However, many folks would probably find that boring, so I'm going to provide the basic bullet points of how the search progressed. A park technician, Sammy Lale, was called by Mr. Dunlap via CB radio. He was informed of the disappearance and dispatched to the area. He arrived at the Dome parking lot around 4:30 p.m. The lot was searched, and then he went up the trail towards Double Springs. Mr. Dunlap continued his search along the Appalachian Trail before heading back towards the parking area and officially reporting Trenny Gibson as missing. He then continued back on the Appalachian Trail as darkness fell. The school group began making their way home around 5:30 p.m. The feeling amongst the students was that Trenny had run off with someone. However, Mr. Dunlap did not agree with that assessment, but he had no other theory on what could have happened. Rangers Taylor, Dick, and Phillips arrived in the area around 6:30 p.m. Phillips checked the Mount Collins shelter and then walked to Collins Gap. Taylor and Dick interviewed Mr. Dunlap and then picked up Phillips at the Collins Gap before returning to the Dome parking area. Later on, they met up with Lale, who was just returning from his search of the Double Springs area. No people on the trail or at the shelters had seen Trenny at any point during the day. As 7 p.m. approached, additional search and rescue resources were called in. By 8:24 p.m., Trenny's mother had been informed of her daughter's disappearance after searchers contacted Bearden High School. Hope called her husband, who decided to fly home immediately. Both of Trenny's parents were expected to arrive at the park headquarters as soon as Mr. Gibson arrived at the airport. Rangers spoke to the high school principal, who said that Trenny was a good student with no problems. He said that he would interview teachers and children to try and get more info on Trenny's past activities and when she was last seen on the trail. By 9 p.m., more searchers arrived at the Dome parking lot, bringing food, batteries, and other supplies. Quadrant maps were used to help divvy up territory and direct search efforts. A crew on the Tennessee side of the park were standing by to help if needed. The weather that evening was rainy, cold, and wet. At 10:15 p.m., searchers split into pairs and began searching numerous areas including Forney Creek, Andrews Bald, and Collins Gap. Men were prepared to stay all night in order to search. However, by midnight, all search teams reported in and all had negative results. Both of Trenny's parents arrived around midnight, bringing some dirty clothes belonging to Trenny that would assist search dogs in picking up a scent. At 2:30 a.m., many searchers left the area to go home, but leaving 3 in the parking lot to stay overnight. At 7 a.m. on October 9th, all NPS personnel arrived back at the Dome parking lot, relieving the 3 who had stayed overnight. 4 dog teams would arrive an hour later. The main focus of the search on this day was the path towards Andrews Bald and also the trail out to Forney Creek. During this time, the road up to Klingman's Dome was closed. A student had informed searchers that he last saw Trenny leave the trail and head east into very dense undergrowth, but he did not specify a point on the trail where this occurred. With more search crews on the way, the teams that were already present fanned out to their respective objectives. At 10:30 a.m., one of the dog teams picked up a scent near Andrews Bald and then headed towards Forney Creek Trail, but no visible signs were detected. Ranger and tracker Dwight McCarter would arrive at 11:05 a.m. on this day. Folks may remember him as an important participant in the search for Dennis Martin in this very same park. A group of 20 Marines also arrived to assist in the search, though they were not dressed for the cold weather. They were only cleared to search for a short period of time. Helicopters were put in the air, but bad weather prevented them from making it to Klingman's Dome. At 2 p.m. on this day, a pair of searchers with a bloodhound got a scent while walking the Appalachian Trail at the Klingman's Dome Tower. They followed the scent off-trail to Klingman's Dome Road and then lost the scent at the road itself. This area is called Collins Gap, and there is a parking lot here for people looking to stop. The search continued throughout the day, eventually ending at 8 p.m. that evening. It was around this time that information came back from a teacher who had interviewed some of the students, Anita Bounds, Scott Troy, and Bobby Coghill. They said they had seen Trenny about half a mile from the Dome parking area. They stopped to rest, and Trenny went on ahead. They said she seemed to be in a hurry to get back. Anita said that she last saw Trenny on the trail, then looked away, and when she looked back, Trenny was nowhere in sight. Bobby Coghill said that he was watching the trail and saw someone who looked like Trenny stop, bend over, and then make a right turn off of the trail and into the woods. Searchers went and checked that area, but there was no trail leading away anywhere. The location was rough terrain with brush and trees. When dogs were brought in to try and pick up a scent there, they were unsuccessful. The end of the first day had negative results, but the dogs picking up Trenny's scent were big clues. One thing I want to mention now and kind of put an asterisk by is that, according to Baldwin and Grubb, searchers found 3 cigarette butts and a beer can with some beer still in it close to the spot where Trenny was last seen. So essentially the spot where she walked off trail and into the woods. We'll get back to the cigarettes later though. On October 10th, the search restarted around 8:30 a.m. Helicopters were able to begin the search by air now that the weather had cleared up a bit. At 1 p.m., search dogs again picked up a scent along the Appalachian Trail, heading to Collins Gap. The dog handlers said that the dogs were following almost the exact same pattern as they were yesterday, showing movement along the trail and then moving off and connecting to the Klingman's Dome Road. All search teams were out of commission by 4:30 p.m. Again, Baldwin and Grubb state that on this day, searchers found 8 cigarette butts at the spot where Trenny's scent trail petered out on the road. Again, this spot has a little parking area for people pulling off of the road. The butts were of the same brand found a day earlier at the spot where Trenny stepped off the trail. And again, I have to put a little asterisk here because I cannot find this fact among the daily search logs, and you would think that they would put that in there because it seems like important evidence. But again, we'll talk about cigarettes later. On October 11th, searchers arrived at 8 a.m. to continue the ground search. At 10:15 a.m., search dogs were again sent out along the Appalachian Trail, and once again, multiple dogs confirmed the positive hit along the trail from the Klingman's Dome Tower, heading towards Collins Gap. And to be clear, the search dogs are detecting a trail from this area and heading east-northeast up the trail to Collins Gap, which gets so close to the road that it wouldn't be difficult at all to go off trail and get on the road itself. After 4:30 p.m., many search crews were released from duty. At 7 p.m., one more dog team came in to check the Appalachian Trail. This dog team once again confirmed the results of the others. Positive hits along the trail heading towards Collins Gap and the road. Starting October 12th, the search began to peter out a bit, with fewer search personnel showing up. The daily logs end entirely on October 18th, with no new evidence having been found along the trail or in the forests. The search would officially end on October 22nd, and overall it was an intense effort, with hundreds of people, including rangers and volunteers, being involved on any given day. In total, some 756 different searchers were involved over the entire course of the operation. They made frequent and effective use of search dogs, and even helicopters when the weather allowed. The search radius went 3 miles in all directions, and trails in the area were searched for up to 15 miles. Nothing was found that gave indication that Trenny was still in the park. Afterwards, the governor of Tennessee would announce a $5,000 reward for anyone who had information leading to the arrest or conviction of an individual responsible for Trenny's disappearance. The reward drew in no new information. The next year, on April 18, 1977, a renewed search was performed in the area where Trenny disappeared. A line sweep system was used for intensive coverage in hopes of finding some clues that would solve the mystery. Unfortunately, after great effort, nothing came of the thorough search. The FBI did become involved in this case, as many rangers believed that Trenny was no longer in the park, and it became increasingly more likely that Trenny may have been a victim of foul play. The FBI ran their investigation behind the scenes, as they always do. They went to Bearden High School and interviewed all the students in Trenny's class in Principal Frank Hall's office. Whatever the FBI learned during their investigation is still unknown, because although the Park Service saw fit to release their records on this case, the FBI has not. To this day, they still issue denials based on the fact that Trenny's case is still open, and there remains a possibility that we could see law enforcement proceedings. It's a fairly common reason for a denial, so much like the Dennis Martin case in this same area, the FBI is still holding out. Of course, the FBI did release their files on Dennis Martin after constant protest. One day I suspect Trenny's file will follow suit. Trenny's father, Robert Gibson, believed that foul play was involved in his daughter's disappearance. He believed that someone had abducted her. He said that she was a top student, well-liked, and did not date. Hope Gibson told newspapers Trenny just never dated. She really didn't have any boyfriends. In fact, if she did like a boy, he'd never know it. Though she was known to be with several boys while at school, neither parent believed that Trenny would run away with a boy or for any other reason. The Gibson family said that 1 year prior to Trenny's disappearance, they had received threats from an unnamed person, and they feared this individual may have taken Trenny. They tried their best to get media support in publicizing Trenny's disappearance, telling them that Trenny was level-headed but not experienced in the mountains. Some of the reasons that Trenny's parents believed that she had not run off with someone were that she left $200 in cash in her room, and that she had not taken any money from her savings. Trenny had been working at a place called Morrison's Cafeteria and had earned $2,000, which was left untouched. Trenny had a dog at home, Mitzi, whom her parents said she loved. She also had injured her foot about 3 weeks prior and still took medicine for it, which was at home. And she was looking forward to spending time with her brother Robert Jr. on that very weekend. Robert Gibson Sr. spent a lot of time advocating for further searches near Klingman's dome, despite believing foul play was involved. For a while, it worked, and Mr. Gibson's constant pushing caused more resources to be put on the ground in 1977. Trenny's mother was not as convinced that a secondary search would be of any assistance. When the second search did occur, few volunteers showed up and Mr. Gibson was disappointed. Rangers told him that many of the searchers who had participated in the first search did not believe Trenny was in the park anymore, and therefore unwilling to spend more time climbing around the mountains in bad weather. As previously stated, the secondary search in 1977 was a failure, turning up no new trace or any evidence at all. Mr. Gibson consulted experts in just about every possible avenue or theory related to Trenny's disappearance. In the end, that's all he had, theories. There were no certainties, and he would be forced to go on with his life not knowing what really happened that day in October. Trenny's brother, Robert Gibson Jr., took a leave from his service in the Navy to come home and participate in the search for Trenny. It's said that he searched those mountains until his feet bled. He could not fathom that Trenny would have run away of her own free will, telling a newspaper, "Trenny and I have been this close since we were real little. There's no way she'd go anywhere when she knew I was coming home. No way." In the years after Trenny's disappearance, Hope Gibson would be contacted by Juanita Baldwin about her book. Hope, a highly religious woman, wrote a letter to be included in its pages. I will let an excerpt of her words speak instead of mine. "Never for a moment after the third day of the search for Trenny have I thought she was lost in the mountains. Too many unanswered questions, but praise God, the day is coming when I'll have the answer to every question. Not only will I learn why Trenny's comb that she never ever parted with was found in the car of a friend, or why that friend was never allowed to be questioned, or why instead of walking back to the parking lot with her after eating half of her lunch, went tracking a bear. Oh, so many unanswered questions. However, I find the more I stay on my knees in prayer, the more God answers." Now, Hope's letter was a whole lot longer than that, but most of it does not really include anything factual about the case and is really much more focused on her faith and belief in God. Still, Hope is alive today, though I believe her last name is now Vaughn. As you might glean from that short bit I just read, Hope still seems to think there was some element of foul play involved in her daughter's disappearance. The problem is, nobody has really been able to connect the dots in a way that makes sense. As always happens in a high-profile disappearance, there is a flood of reported sightings and also visions by psychics. Trenny's disappearance was no different. Some of these reports appear more legitimate than others, so we will focus on just a few. For example, shortly after the incident, a girl matching Trenny's description came to Bryson City to get married. She gave her name as Alice Marie. Another reported sighting was of a girl believed by a witness to be Trenny getting on a plane at Newark with a much older man, heavy-set, wearing green pants. The man and the girl got off the plane in Nassau at 11:30 p.m. It's unknown if this sighting was ever investigated. Another sighting was from a girl who came into the Waynesville hospital with minor cuts and bruises. She was accompanied by 4 men and gave different names to the nurse who was treating her. One of these names was Riste Gibson. The nurse in question said that the girl fit the description released for Trenny Gibson. After investigation, it was determined that this was not Trenny, but a local girl. Still, I thought it would be prudent to leave it in here because this is often how these tips end up, as misidentifications. A psychic contacted the Park Service while the search was occurring and stated Trenny was still alive or else frozen in a sitting position. They said that searchers are close but need to search a little to the left of the area they were currently in, or near the mouth of a creek. The psychic saw Trenny sitting in a hollow or what might be a bear den in a rocky area with little undergrowth. The information was acted on to the best of searchers' abilities, but nothing came of it. Robert Simpson was always looked upon with some suspicion. He was Trenny's friend and spent a lot of time with her that day. Robert's father, Robert Simpson Sr., was an assistant U.S. attorney. He was a pretty powerful man. Some thought that he would have the ability to stifle an investigation into his son if Robert Jr. was ever suspected of criminal behavior, especially in the case of Trenny. Of course, Robert Jr. separated from Trenny at Andrews Bald, and by all accounts, he never saw Trenny again. No witnesses saw him chasing Trenny or anything like that either. In terms of detail, all we really have is Robert's testimony. He was asked by authorities to write down everything he could remember about the incident the day after Trenny disappeared. In his statement, he describes the bus ride and walking to Andrews Bald. Robert and Trenny hiked about a mile together and then stopped for a rest as Trenny was breathing hard. After 5 minutes, they started down the trail again. When the two reached Andrews Bald, Trenny was in good spirits. They looked around a bit, then stood under a tree when it began raining. By the time the bulk of the students were ready to head back, Trenny asked Robert if he was coming with them. Robert said that he was going to stay a little while longer. She said goodbye, and that was the last time Robert saw her. When Robert did start heading back on his own, he apparently started or attempted to track a bear he supposedly believed was in the area. What caused him to believe this, whether he saw a bear or scat or bear sign, is unknown. I'll also add that I have yet to find a quote from Robert himself indicating he actually did this, but Trenny's mother indicated he made such a statement, so we'll go with that. When Robert got back to the bus and saw that Trenny was missing, he started asking people questions about what they saw. They told him that they stopped to rest and Trenny kept going. They also said that the trail curved to the left, but Trenny went to the right, into the forest, and nobody had seen her since. Newspapers at the time often mentioned an incident that was at the forefront of investigators' minds when it came to a potential abduction angle. The story goes that Trenny had received threats from an unknown man who had attempted to break into her room over a year prior. But this individual is not unknown. That man's name was Kelvin Bowman. Most public sources kind of tell a story that this was a guy who apparently tried to date Trenny 2 years prior, but she seems to have denied his advances. The incident at the heart of all this, however, involves Kelvin Bowman going to the Gibson house late one night and breaking into or attempting to break into Trenny's room. Hope Gibson, Trenny's mother, would end up shooting Kelvin Bowman in the foot or leg, and police were called afterwards. Kelvin was subsequently arrested, tried, and sentenced to jail. The Gibson family mentioned in some newspapers that Kelvin made threats to Trenny while in the courtroom after sentencing. All of this seems to indicate that this might have been a man who would have a motive to harm Trenny. According to Baldwin and Grubb, after Trenny disappeared, a few students from her school came forward to Trenny's parents, saying that they had seen Kelvin Bowman following the bus as it traveled to the Smoky Mountains. They also said that Trenny's hair comb was found in her friend Robert Simpson's car. Robert Gibson approached the Knox County Sheriff with this information in hopes that he could use it to investigate both Kelvin Bowman and Robert Simpson to see if they were at all involved in Trenny's disappearance. Concerns would only increase after Tina Gibson, Trenny's 14-year-old sister, had a conversation with Robert Simpson. Tina said that Robert visited the Gibson house twice while her parents were staying in Gatlinburg as the search for Trenny was continuing in the Smoky Mountains. During one of these visits, Robert Simpson told Tina, quote, "If Kelvin Bowman has Trenny, he will kill her. If he does not have her, I think she might have run off with some horny hitchhiker." The Knox County Sheriff's Department was charged with investigating Kelvin Bowman's involvement. They interviewed Mr. Dunlap, Trenny's teacher and field trip leader, who was certain that no cars had been following the bus. He felt positive because he hadn't told anyone what their destination was until all of the students were on the bus and departing for the Smokies. Bearden High School principal Frank Hall told the sheriff that Kelvin Bowman was in school on October 8, 1976, the same day Trenny vanished. Due to the alibi, Kelvin Bowman was cleared of suspicion. The comb that was rumored to have been found in Robert Simpson's vehicle was, seemingly, never investigated. Much like the Dennis Martin case that I've covered a handful of times, I think it is necessary to discuss the Missing 411 retelling of this case, because I believe it has caused a lot of misconceptions and confusion. I know some people dislike it when I do this, but it helps set the record straight. If someone corrects something I present in one of my videos and they have evidence to show that I'm wrong, I have no problem with that. In fact, I appreciate it. I'm not interested in presenting incorrect information, and I'm less interested in clinging to an outdated version of a story instead of evolving my own thinking. So let's take a quick look at this. In Missing 411, the Eastern U.S., David Paulides theorizes that someone or something pulled Trenny off the trail. This is mainly based solely on the fact that Trenny's attention seemed to have been on something in the woods, though it seems quite clear from the testimony of Trenny's classmates that she willingly walked off into the woods and was not forced by anything or anyone. Though it's not explicitly stated in the book, there seems to be some implication that Bigfoot might be involved or something, and Robert Simpson supposedly tracking a bear is used to justify this line of thinking. Again, it feels similar to the Dennis Martin case in that sense, but for me, that's all just whatever. I don't really care. That's all opinion and theory, and people are in their rights to have those. The part I take issue with is that Paulides mentions that search dogs picked up Trenny's scent at Andrews Bald, quoting, "One specific report from Swain County Rescue Squad K-9 unit had interesting information. Dog number 1 picks up scent at Andrews Bald and heads toward the Forney Creek Trail. 2 dogs had hit on this same area." But Paulides fails to mention that another group tracked her scent to a road. In the report which Paulides references, this is in bold and underlined. How could you leave that out? But more important than that, this specific scent trail heading to the road was confirmed numerous times in the daily search logs, as we read. It's impossible to miss. Paulides never mentions it once. You can draw your own conclusions, but to me it feels like it isn't mentioned because it indicates that Trenny left the park entirely. And the theory in this book is that Trenny was grabbed off the trail by someone or something, which, to be honest with you, sounds like foul play to me, and whenever I see that I'm reminded of the Missing 411 exclusionary criteria, which include both foul play and voluntary disappearance. There's no way you could rule those out of this case. They are easily the two most viable theories. Anyway, I won't linger on this topic, but I have to bring it up because oftentimes the information most people are familiar with comes from Missing 411, and the record really needs to be set straight. So let's move on. There's something that occurs sometimes with select cold cases. They capture the interest of someone with an inclination to spend their time, energy, and resources on investigating an incident that others have given up on. That's true for a couple of people in this case. One of them you probably already met on this channel. Love him or hate him, police officer Michael Bouchard has taken an interest in Trenny's case, much like he did for another Smoky Mountains mystery, the Dennis Martin case. Michael Bouchard is also an author, and he has published a number of books about his investigations into cold cases. But there's someone else as well, a woman named Laura Riste, who caught an interest in Trenny's case and has been investigating it for years. Many consider her to be quite an authority on the details of this incident, having spoken to many of those involved. She currently runs a website dedicated to Trenny, and her opinion and knowledge on the case are well respected. These two people know a lot more about the case than you would get from reading any report, newspaper, or book. At this moment, much of this unknown information is currently just in their heads. For this reason, I felt it was absolutely necessary to have them on the channel and talk to both of them about what they have learned about the case and what theories they have developed when it comes to what happened to Trenny. Having talked to them, I can tell you that they definitely have information that you will not find anywhere else. Now, I did a 2-hour interview with them, so it all won't make it into this video, but I will be showing you what I found to be the most important and interesting information. If you want to watch the full video, I will post it for free on my Patreon. The link to that will be in the description. The first thing I wanted to do is confirm. I mean, we both know the story of, what happened. She's going on a school field trip. They go to Andrew's Bald. She's coming back, and then people see her apparently walk off trail. And the thing that I'm a little curious to get your impressions on, because I have my own, is that it appears, based on the scent trails and whatnot, that she walks off trail, and then it kind of sounds like at some point she gets back on the trail up near the Appalachian Trail, because it seems like dogs picked up her scent up there. And she takes the Appalachian Trail, or Appalachian Trail, excuse me. People get angry when I mispronounce it. Heading east until it gets really close to the Clingman's Dome Road. And then it seems like she cut across to the road, and then that's where the scent trail stops. Is that your guys' understanding of what the scent trails show, or what our best knowledge is of her path of travel after she disappeared?
If that's correct, it's very indicative of like when people are being tracked by a dog and they hit a main road. Now, if she had gone out to the other side of the road, the dog would have picked up a scent. So she had to get into a car. But
Mm-hmm.
again, another obstacle we're dealing with was the weather conditions with rain and everything else. I don't, in my mind, see how the dogs were really brought in the next day. If you have rain on, any type of contact DNA, it usually destroys it. So, similar to the Dennis Martin case, they brought dogs in, but Dennis's DNA with all that rain had been destroyed way before the dogs even came in. So my question is, what were the dogs actually tracking?
Hmm.
So
And Laura, do you have any point of view kind of on Trenny's path of travel based on, the NPS report and anything you've learned about the case?
Um, well, Michael and I were talking, but I've always sort of wondered. Um, there was a group of students that she was walking with, and they stopped to rest. And Trenny said that she wanted to keep going. So she left their group and she kept walking. And the consensus among that group was it looked like at one point Trenny stopped, looked to the right, and went off the trail. And I often wondered if that was true or if that was what they saw, but then Trenny perhaps stepped back on the trail
Hmm.
and continued her journey towards the bus, or if the students are mistaken, or if that's what they were told to tell the authorities. Interestingly enough, Trenny's scent was also picked up by Clingman's Dome. And that was a part of like an area that wasn't covered by the field trip itself. The dome at one time had a storeroom in the base of it, and I should say the storeroom is still there. It's just reconfigured a bit, but there was an area in the base of the dome, and it was used for a storage room, and it had a dirt floor. And one of my concerns or questions was that it was a potentially a good place to put someone or hold someone, as it had dirt floor in it. But in speaking with Dwight McCarter, he claims that tower base was searched, and he said it was locked at the time. They had to bring in something to bust the lock off of it, and he said there was nothing there at the time, but yet her scent was picked up in that area. But in all of that, I tend to agree that she left the park by car. I
Hmm.
believe if Rennie was to be found in the park, they would have found her. Barring that, she plunged so deeply into the undergrowth and the thicket and everything, that they absolutely could not find any remains to verify that she died in the Smokies. So I think it's either that's what happened to her or she left the park by car. Because if I believe if she had been anywhere else, they likely would have found her.
With this case, kind of like many others that are kind of, there's kind of little details that people pick up on, and then it builds people build theories. And there's one I see commented on a lot, but when I was researching for my video, I couldn't really find much to verify any of it. And it has to do with Trenny wearing a star sapphire ring or a sapphire diamond ring. I'm not sure which, but some people make a big deal out of that, as if like, who gave it to her? Where did she get it? Did she have a boyfriend who may be involved that we don't know about? So I'm curious what you guys know about this ring and its provenance.
Yeah, like what I was told by her family was that Trenny was given the ring by the family, and it was worth about $600. And back in 1976, that was, a lot of money. It was semi-valuable, and she was wearing it the day that she disappeared. And they came to find out that this ring ended up in the possession of a girl that was in the sophomore class. So she was a grade below Trenny, and she and Trenny knew each other. This girl was quite a talented singer. They knew each other from church, and also from Bearden Junior High and Bearden Senior High, where they were attending when Trenny disappeared. And that was very suspicious as to why she'd have this ring. And a girl that came forward, a grown up lady now, came forward to me about 6 years ago and told me that she was the one that confronted this girl via telephone after her mother found out that this girl had Trenny's ring. And this girl that confronted the possessor of the ring asked her, how did you get it? How did you come to have it? Why do you still have it? Why don't you give it to the Gibson family? That sort of thing. This girl was very evasive in her answers. She said that she was given the ring by Trenny to hold for her. And when pressured, she finally said that yes, it probably is the right thing to do to return the ring to the parents of Trenny, but she never ever did. And this person passed away. What year are we in now? She passed away 21 years ago now. Trenny herself gave the ring to this girl, according to her.
On the day she disappeared.
Yes, to hold.
Okay. Interesting.
And like my father would have said, this girl that had the ring, well, it didn't do her any damn good because she passed away. She was quite young, in her early 40s. So I don't know if that's karma coming around or, something else. I'm not sure.
Okay.
But I don't know why, if you had this thing, why you didn't want to, give it back. But, maybe she had her own reason.
Okay.
Now, with the ring story, another story to that is Robert Simpson, and I don't know if Michael has told you much about Robert Simpson, but he sat with Trenny on the bus that day, and he was the young man that Trenny hiked to Andrews Bald with. And he came forward and told Miss Gibson, Trenny's mother, that when Trenny was in the washroom that afternoon washing her hands, she took her ring off and she gave it to a different girl in the sophomore class. Now, this girl is completely different from the one I just talked about. Totally different girl. Trenny handed the ring to her and said that she wanted her to hold it for her. And when questioned, this girl didn't know about this ring, didn't have it, whatever. And it seemed odd to me why Robert Simpson would know this, why he would be privy to this information that Trenny took her ring off and gave it to a girl in the sophomore class. I've interviewed a lot of Bearden alumni that were in the same class with Trenny. Some knew her, some didn't know her very well, but nobody could see why she'd take off a valuable piece of jewelry like that and give it to somebody to hold for her.
Hmm.
Because it wasn't like a $10 ring, it was a $600 piece of jewelry. So
Right. Okay. So Mike, you
Yep.
putting your cop hat on since you're a police officer. When you hear this about the ring, a lot of people think this has significance in the case, maybe
Well,
towards foul play. What do you think?
it actually could because, um, my question is the first girl that was supposed to have it was Tina Mays. And she was, I believe, the one that had gotten it first, and then it went to Robin Moses. Now, here's the problem: I've tried to contact Tina Mays and Robin's sister, Kathy Tuck, and none of them want to talk. So my cop hat right away says, you know, you've done something because but I find it really odd with this case is a lot of these people, and I'm hypocritical about people. Is these are all like born again Christians and all of this stuff. Baby, let me tell you what, hell's got one door, and your ass is going into it. You know what I'm saying? Because you're all liars. You're all liars. You know how you got the ring. You know how she got the ring. So, and then, your sister won't clear you. The other one won't say anything. So, it could have something, or it could just be a total. From what I've talked to one of the teachers that replaced Wayne Dunlop, and basically he said he wouldn't doubt it if she stole it
Hmm. That's
because that's just
interesting.
the type of person he said she was. And her name came up right away, right when I said, "Hey, what do you think?" Her name came right up
And
right away.
that's
So
Tina Mays, right?
no, no, that would have been Robin Moses. He
Robin
says
Moses. Okay.
he says she was a teenager going on 41. Bad friends, bad habits, bad everything. So, you know, and you got to understand, I mean, if you look at the dynamics of how many of these people that were involved in this passed away because of substance abuse, I mean, holy crap.
yeah.
I
Yeah.
mean, I say it's Trenny's curse or the
Hmm.
wrath of Trenny because everybody that had something to do with this passed away, has passed away. Even Kelvin Bowman.
The other piece of evidence that people talk a lot about, it's one of those ones that, you look in the report and you won't find it, but you'll find a lot of people talking about it, and that's that a beer can with some beer in it and some cigarette butts were found on the trail. And then some more cigarette butts were found at the location on Klingman's Dome Road where the scent trail that was tracking Trenny ends. And a lot of people talk about this, and for good reason, but it's really hard to find a source for it, like who found it. And I've always said if I would think it would be in the search report if someone found it. So what do you guys know about that, and why isn't it in the search report if
Well,
people found this evidence?
there were some cigarette butts found at the side of the road where it was right in the spot where the dogs lost the scent for Trenny. And they believed that that's where she got into a car. What I was told was the cigarette butts that were by the road looked like somebody dumped an ashtray out of a car. They were kind of in an almost like a pile sort of thing. So that's what it appeared to them. Randy Collins claims that he was the one that found the cigarette butts that were off the trail in approximately the spot where the students said that it looked like Trenny left the trail and went to the right. And he said it looked like two people had hunkered down there. One person was bigger and heavier because their footprints were more pronounced in the soil, and the other person was smaller and lighter. According to Randy, he figured that Trenny was one of the people, and the other person was likely a male and a smoker because there were cigarette butts found there, and about a half a can of beer, and the beer was still fresh enough to smell, so it hadn't been sitting there, for days or anything like that. And he claimed that these cigarettes had a certain kind of a filter on them, and they were called parliaments. They kind of had a triangle shaped filter. And for whatever reason, the Collins family, now this is Randy, his father RM, and his uncle Steve, they were all of the mind that Trenny's brother Bob was involved. And maybe he was the one that was there and made those footprints in the ground, smoked those cigarettes, and consumed that can of beer. The only evidence of that is Bob happened to like those cigarettes and Bob happened to drink that beer, but hundreds and thousands of other people, did the same. They have no proof that it was Bob. They just have a funny hunch that, maybe that's what happened.
Mm.
Cigarettes found in that spot where the beer can was. There were these same cigarette butts found on the trail, and they were the same cigarette butts that were found at the side of the road where it looked like someone dumped an ashtray out of a car. Randy said that he got a baggie, he got a stick, and he kind of just whisked, these cigarette butts into a baggie. He gave it to one of the park rangers that was out there in the search and said, "Hey, I found this or whatever." And the ranger basically said, "Well, this isn't anything," and he threw them out. And I mean, this is 1976. We didn't have DNA. The most they could have done was maybe fingerprints or something like that. But anyway, they got thrown out. They weren't held for evidence.
What do you think about this, Mike? Do you think that was like a big failure on the part of the MPS?
Well, I think in a lot of the cases back in the 70s, it was uh, a big fail for them. You have to realize back then they weren't sworn law enforcement. They had never gone through academy, never went through investigative training. They were just people that got hired for a job. Here's your suit, let's go. But my question with the Collinses was really, they were so adamant that Bob Gibson was involved. Why? Why do you think that?
And
What makes you believe that?
Too, that you have to have some sort of motivation to do this, right? So, that's
and then when I did talk to Kelvin Bowman, he said that what I found is I'm in the process right now of accessing the actual shooting report when he was shot that night, the year before by Hope Gibson, Trenny Gibson's mother. And I've already found things in some of her basic statements that when I talked to Kelvin Bowman, it didn't match. And I believed him. Because listen, he's a suspect. He's voluntarily coming to me and saying, "Hey, this is my story." Because for 48 years, people have been throwing me under the bus for something I didn't have anything to do with.
Well, okay. Well, let's take a pause real quick. Let's talk about Kelvin Bowman real quick. But for people that I know Laura knows and I know, but Kelvin, most people, according to reports, Trenny's family, they said, oh, she didn't date, and this guy was like a stalker, and they shot him as he was leaving her bedroom, basically, shot him in the leg. He was a bad guy. Well, I get it. We'll get to that. And that he was convicted in trial, and during that time, he made threats against Trenny's life. So basically, in the newspapers at the time, they made him sound like a really bad guy. This is a potential suspect, murderer, something, kidnapper who could have taken Trenny. So Why do you say you believe Kelvin when the family has clearly stated that this was some sort of stalker type guy who should be looked at as a suspect? So get into detail on why you believe Kelvin, but not the family.
Well, because a lot of the things that the family said, um, I looked at the house. I kind of I creeped on the house on one of those like what is it, Willow and stuff like that to see what the house looked like, what the possibility of what was. But she said she shot him. He was out in the front yard, drunk, yelling for her brother Robert. I talked to him. He says, "Yeah, I knew Robert, but we didn't like hang around." And he said, Trenny had been leaving that window open for me on a certain day for months. And the
So, like,
mother
they
knew
had a
that.
relationship. Is that what you're kind of hinting at? They had
It was a
a.
relationship, but you have to remember, Kelvin Bowman was an African American.
Mhm.
You're talking about 1976 Tennessee, you know? So there was a lot more to that than, and then she says in one of her reports that, well, after I shot him, he came into the house and I didn't shoot him again because he was somebody's son. You know what? Listen, no, that's not how it works. If you shoot somebody and they come into your house, you're going to shoot them again. That's how it works. Especially if you're in fear. If you weren't in fear, or for you or your daughter, why did you shoot him in the first place? And then what happened was the night he went to the hospital, her father went up there and had a few choice words for him. You know, um, the father also during his trial said that he tried to actually get him sent to a juvenile detention facility in Texas. And it's like, okay. And it's not uncommon for people that have been arrested, or I mean, he went to a juvenile detention center for 9 months. What do you think he's gonna say to her? Okay, yeah, have a nice day. No, he's going for 9 months. He wants to kill everybody. Do they often? People say that all the time. Everybody's going to kill everybody, but it very seldom happens. On the date of her disappearance, the FBI confirmed that he was in the school. The principal confirmed that he was in the school. It was an hour and a half trip. How did he make it from the school all the way up there by about 3:40?
So, what I'm gathering is that Kelvin Bowman
Kelvin
was
Bowman
he
was
was wrongly accused in a way. Basically, he was like the boyfriend
well,
of Trenny, and her
well,
parents just didn't like that. Is
well,
that
what
your
happened is a
understanding?
year after this, or in '78, he got himself in trouble again. He got involved in a sexual assault. He was sentenced again. And then 48 years later, I come knocking on his door. Hey, here I am. What happened? But, if he was so guilty, why would he? Like, here you have all these classmates I try to reach out to, Facebook, text message, everything. They won't respond back. But yet the guy that's the primary suspect in the case, yeah, I'll talk about it. I got no problem talking about it. So, that kind of leads me to think, well, who's really the liar in the case? Him or some of the people she was with?
Hmm.
And
I
also the parents trying to cover up the fact that their daughter was seeing a young African American man.
yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
I think there's a lot of secrets that have to do with the family, and there's some things that they didn't want us to find out, to maybe disclose. And this is definitely one of them on the list. Was Trenny? She was attracted to African American males.
Hmm.
And I mean, if she's purposely leaving her window unlocked and opened, and he said, I think I read you the text he sent me.
Yeah.
He said, yeah, we had planned this already.
Hmm.
I was driven to the house. I got out. We would meet, come back because he knew the brother wasn't there. He knew the father wasn't there.
Yeah.
So it was some prearranged plan, but yet the mother seems like it was a random act of just stalking.
Yeah.
It wasn't. He was doing this for weeks,
I think a
and
lot of people would be surprised to hear this because I think they automatically would assume that the family of a missing young girl would want to give the authorities and even the public as much accurate information as possible. And by even pointing at Kelvin Bowman, it appears that they were incorrectly doing that, then it makes it look like they weren't really giving Trenny the best chance at being found, because Kelvin Bowman sounds like a total dead end. You think
Well,
that's
the other thing is, Trenny also was seeing another young black man. This was after Calvin Bowman. I'm not sure at the time if Calvin Bowman was still incarcerated or if he had been released and was already back at Beard. But Trenny was casually seeing another young African American male, and his name was Derek Scott, and he was a basketball player. And apparently, she was caught in a car with him by her father.
Yeah.
So was this Derek Scott fellow ever considered a suspect to your knowledge, or
Michael and I are having a bugger of a time, to pardon the pun, trying to locate him.
Trying to find him.
We're trying
Well,
so we can talk to him.
here's a statement made by Calvin Bowman. He said, "I did not go to the house to see Bob. I was dropped off at the house. Trenny was letting me in the window when she saw me. I was halfway through the window when I got shot by her mother. So
wow.
it was already pre-planned, and I got it right here on my cell phone. His text is August 27th of this year.
And again, so Hope's version of events was that he was on the
Totally
lawn
different.
screaming for Robert or
Right.
Bob to come out,
Right.
for even though he didn't know him, according to Kelvin.
Yeah,
I often suspected that Trenny and Calvin were seeing one another because her mother's story just didn't make any sense. Who in their right mind would break into somebody's house, in the process of breaking in, be shot? So then they just continue breaking in, I guess, so the homeowner can finish the job they started and blow their head off. Like their story just made no sense.
well,
And interviewed a neighbor that lived down the street from the Gibsons when Trenny was when she disappeared, and that person actually still lives in exactly the same house in Knoxville on the same street. And she said that the night that Calvin was shot, he was limping down the street. He walked past their house, and she had heard the ruckus. She'd heard the gunshot and wondered, what had happened. Then she seen this young man walking down the street, limping, saying, "I've been shot. I've been shot," and so on. Whereas
Wow.
Hope turns it around that Calvin was shot, gains access to the house, comes in the house, surrenders himself to Hope. She calls the authorities and I guess holds him there till the police come and arrest him and so on and so forth. Whereas this neighbor said, no, he was walking down the street, limping, moaning that he had been shot.
right. And I have another thing that he text messaged me. I had been sneaking in and out of Trenny's room for a while. It just so happened we got caught. She told me to get out, and he because of her father, who, if he had caught me, he would have killed me if he had been home. Trenny tried to stick up for me, but her mother told her that I was not good enough for her. Boom. But he also told me in a lot of conversations that it was one of the most dysfunctional households he's ever been into, because Trenny was more like their maid, not a daughter, a maid. Watch
Really?
the kid, feed the, clean the house, and
See, that's another thing you don't really get from
right.
reading the main, your average sources for this, because the parents make it sound like this was a very happy home. Trenny was happy. She wasn't dating. She was an angel child. Everything was good.
So
But Kelvin Bowman doesn't think so. Was she in a stable home? Was she happy? What do we know about that?
No, she at school pretended to be happy, but she was in a really dysfunctional, because he mentioned it here quite a few times that her household was. What I just read, I read off a text message he sent me, that he and her had been seeing each other for a while. She left the windows open for him to sneak in. The mother says, no, he was breaking in, which was not the case. So the mother's version of the story, that's why I'm interested to get the police report. I don't really care, too much about, I just want to know what she said. Because
Well, it's very interesting because that kind of would, unhappy kids can run away, right?
Right. And they do every day. I mean,
Right.
people disappear every day on their own. I mean, I'll be honest with you. In my mind, I kind of think she's still out there. I don't think she.
Well, we'll get to theories. We'll get to
Okay, we'll
theories
get
soon.
there. Yeah.
One
But,
one last point on this though is it was stated multiple times that after he was convicted, he said something that he would kill Trenny. Is that just something Hope made up?
the first place it shows up is in Baldwin and Grubb's book,
Right.
right? But the only people Baldwin and Grubb talked to was Hope Gibson.
Is that right?
Because they couldn't get court records because he was a juvenile. You can't release court records. So how would they have known? She couldn't have got a copy of the court records to verify it. She was going based on what Hope Gibson says.
What I understand was Calvin Bowman said something to the to the effect of, "I'll be back" or something like that, like I'll return or I'll be back, kind of thing. When he goes and serves his sentence and whatever and comes back. In speaking with people that knew Trenny at school, they said they all kind of, the consensus is in she wasn't from a happy home.
Yep.
Hope Gibson tends to say that Trenny didn't really hang around with other kids, outside of school. She kept to herself. She was a homebody. And I think that's true to a point. But I also think Trenny didn't want to bring other people around, because if she did, she was going to have to explain some things. Why is she the family scrub lady? Why is her why can he just lay around in his room all day listening to music and smoking dope? Why do we have to look after her little brother's every whim? Why are they constantly going back and forth to church, and Hope's whole being focus is the church, the church, the church? Why does Trenny's sister Tina get to, hang out with other kids and go over to their house and stay over and do this and do that? She knew that there was going to be a lot of questions and things she was going to have to answer for, and she didn't have the answers, and it was just easier not to have anybody over or invite anyone around.
I think she was afraid of them meeting her parents, either the mother or the father, which kind of brings me to even a darker tale than that. What may have been going on behind closed doors.
I did talk to that did get into the house, mainly because they were friends that were kind of persistent, like, I really want to come over. I want to see your room. I want to do this and want to do that kind of thing. And they did get invited in, and then they were like, holy shit.
Like, yeah. Getting out.
There's something very, very wrong here.
So this is going to be news to a lot of people that Trenny may not have really been in a very good home at all.
Well, she wasn't. She wasn't in a good home at all. And you see, this is like you and I have discussed, before on the phone about, what people learn on podcasts. And, like I said, the only two podcasts I ever suggested are either yours or Micah Hanks, because, you guys research and go into this stuff, where the other ones are just taking or making up their own line of crap and pushing it out on the population, who seems, listen, and if they seem to buy the garbage that's put on 411, I got a bridge in Brooklyn for sale. But there was also a second suspect.
Right, that's where we're going next. So yeah, there's only two suspects really that are named that are in this case. The first one we just talked about, Calvin Bowman. The second, her friend, Robert Simpson, a what seemingly privileged kid, a powerful
Mhm.
father who
Yeah.
could keep him out of trouble, theoretically, if he
Yeah.
had to, and Hope, at least in Baldwin and Grubb's book, Hope, wrote a letter where she kind of directly points at Robert, saying, "Well, Trenny's comb was found in Robert's car, and she
Well,
would never separate from that comb." So, what are we dealing with here with Robert Simpson
well,
as
I,
a
you know, my thought about that is a little different. You know, we already know Hope Gibson. Her statements aren't very accurate because her daughter never saw anybody, never had boyfriends, never had this. Well, obviously, she was, she was departing from the truth because she knew all this was going on. So, why would I start to believe what she has to say now? Now, in Robert Simpson's case, if anybody may have been involved in something, and I'm not saying a homicide in anything, it might have been him, but you have to remember. So they went up to part of the park. They ate lunch. She decides she's coming back, right? So she was rapidly walking past about five or six friends, sat down for a while, and continued to walk. So we know that nothing had happened to her prior to her getting to her friends. So to say that Robert Simpson did something to her up there, you know, she was walking at a pace and then she sat down. None of her friends mentioned that there were any physical injuries on her. Okay. Now, it could have been simply she was wearing Robert Simpson's jacket. What if she took her comb out of the pocket, put it in the jacket? He ended up getting it back before she takes off going down the hill. It ends up in his car with his jacket. Now, so I talked to one of his relatives and I said, well, what's your take on this thing about a beer?
real quick, Mike. So you're referring to
Robert Simpson
Robert
Jr.
Simpson. There's been reports that what he was doing when Trenny left was that he was tracking a bear. That's what you're
Right.
referring to, right?
But, but you know what? I looked everywhere. I could never find him saying that.
Me neither.
So did he really say it? I don't think he said it. I
It's
think that was just another somebody's making a line of crap up.
Sorry, Laura, what do you got?
it's in Politis's book.
Yeah, of
Yes.
course it is. Of course it is. And we
And
know
which
how good
which kind of leads to Bigfoot in his book, it
yeah,
seems to
yeah.
me.
So
It's like,
yeah. So it's in Politis's book, but so did all the other falsehoods about the Dennis Martin case. So
well, Laura, what are your thoughts on Robert Simpson as a suspect? Do you think it has potential or?
let me just step away for
Has
1 second here.
potential. Is he responsible for a homicide? I don't know. I just think he knew a lot more about what happened that day than he let on. And he was well protected by his father. His father was very powerful. He could have screwed up your life with the stroke of a pen if he wanted to.
Right.
Oh, so I do find some of Robert's behavior a bit suspicious. Apparently, and now this is according to the Gibson family. So Hope's sister Flossie, she came to stay at their house in Knoxville while the Gibsons were up in the Smoky Mountains in Gatlinburg, and they were searching for Trenny. So Flossie Collins, that was Hope's sister, she came out and stayed at the house in Knoxville because Tina and Miracle, Trenny's siblings, were still attending school, and then she was there every day, could look after the house and so on and so forth. And she said that Robert Simpson rather, kept coming to the house and basically acting like he was the personal secretary for the Gibsons and he was screening their phone calls. And this went on for several days till Flossie finally managed to convince him to stop, that they did not need him to do this and it really was not appropriate. And in that time, when Robert Simpson was at the house, he made a couple of comments to Tina Gibson about Trenny's disappearance. He said that if Calvin Bowman had Trenny, that he would kill her. Or if it came to be that Calvin Bowman didn't have Trenny, Robert figured that Trenny ran off with some horny hitchhiker. So that's when these statements were made. Now, the comb thing, I'm on the fence about the comb. It could be a complete red herring, like Michael said. Trenny had this comb. It was a nice heavy comb. It was made by the Stanley Company. They sold door to door, kind of like Fuller Brush used to back in the day. And Trenny had this comb, and her sister Tina had an identical one. And Trenny loved the thing, and it was always in her jeans pocket. Apparently, this comb was found after Trenny disappeared, and it was found on the dash of Robert Simpson's car. And who was the one that discovered it but Trenny's brother Bob? And it was just sitting out in the open on the dash of the car. Robert Simpson apparently had been using it to comb his own hair because it was all kind of twisted or in the comb, that sort of thing. Bob Gibson asked Robert, what the hell? Why do you have Trenny's comb? And he was told that Trenny had given it to Robert just to kind of keep for her, hold on for her kind of thing. So the other thing with that is, another way to look at it is Trenny knew Robert Simpson quite well. She was friends with him. Basically, Robert Simpson was good pals with Bob Gibson, and then that's how he and Trenny got to be friends. Trenny had been in Robert's car before, so could she have dropped the comb in there maybe the day before or something? Absolutely, it's possible. The other thing is she was wearing Robert Simpson's coat when she was last seen. Could she have taken the comb out of her jeans and then put it in the pocket of the coat? Sure. Could she have dropped the comb on the trail and maybe Robert Simpson was the one that found it? Maybe. The other thing is, if you've listened to the Missing podcast, you've heard me talk about my friend Jim. Jim attended East Tennessee State University at the same time that some of the Bearden grads attended. And they were the class that would have graduated with Trenny Gibson in 1978. And the theory among them was Trenny had gotten into an altercation with some of the Bearden students. A small group of them, maybe 3 kids, maybe 4. She was wearing Robert Simpson's coat at the time that this happened. And she got into an altercation with them. Somebody held her, but because she was wearing Robert Simpson's coat and it was several sizes too big for her, they took her ring from her. They potentially took her comb as well. They held her arms, but because this coat was so large, she was able to peel out of it. She took off running, and she got lost in the underbrush and thickets and everything that's in that wooded area in the vast region of the Smoky Mountains. And that's why they never found her. But Robert Simpson, apparently, according to this group of Bearden alumni, he got his coat back. And possibly the comb was in the pocket or fell to the ground, and that's how he gained possession of the comb. That's how this student potentially gained possession of the ring. Or maybe a boyfriend or something was one of the students in that group that accosted Trenny, and maybe he gave the ring to Robin or gave the ring to Tina. We don't know. But that was the consensus that they had.
Well, it's an interesting thought because I know talking with Mike that he's tried to get the FBI files on this case, which, much like the Dennis Martin case, have not been released, but they probably should be after this long time. But Mike, you were saying you think that might have something to do with Robert Simpson's father, potentially.
Yeah, they're trying to protect his father because
I suggest to Hope Gibson, and this is about 5 years ago, and she got really upset with me. I suggested to her if she were to have Trenny legally declared dead, we could get we could get access to all that information.
True.
And was absolutely outraged.
Ugh.
And I said, I know it's not what you want. And I said, it's not what I want either. But I said, then we could have access to everything and maybe we could piece the damn thing together as to who was responsible.
Yeah.
They talk about closure. I don't like the word closure. To me, it's just, people are looking for answers. But then the thing is, when they get answers, now they're going to have to find out and figure out how they're going to live with it, how they're going to live with the answers to the questions that they had, type of thing. But she was absolutely outraged at that I even suggest such a thing, because in doing so, even if we could find out exactly what happened to Trenny, if somebody harmed her or what, we couldn't bring that person to justice because we've already had her declared dead. But I think after 48 years, it's time, kind of thing, that she let go of that and maybe have her declared dead.
So, Mike, what are your thoughts on the FBI files and them kind of jamming you up like that?
Well, and again, my next, when it came to the Dennis Martin case, it took me 19 FOI requests to get him to release it. So, what I'm going to do in this case is I put the original FOIA together, sent it. They denied it. And I said, well, what's your basis of exclusionary rule? It doesn't fit the exclusionary rule. It's a lost person case. It's not criminal. You never deemed anybody to be a suspect in a crime, just like Dennis Martin. You have no new witnesses, no people of interest that, at least now, you can't even arrest anybody because they're all dead. So what is your reason? Well, it was a assistant U.S. district attorney's son, Robert Simpson Jr., who was a person of interest. His father was in charge of all of the court action on federal land in that area. I have some thoughts on it. We know when Trenny Gibson was running down the hill, we know Robert wasn't in pursuit of her. As a matter of fact, I talked to one of his teachers and I said, let me ask you a question. If Trenny ran from him, could he catch her? He says, absolutely not. The kid was too heavy, too out of shape. One never caught her because she was athletic. He was overweight, couldn't catch her. Okay. So we know he wasn't chasing her, pursuing her down the hill, right? That beer story, another Pilatus plug, if one wants to call it that, to enhance some mystery that wasn't even there. So yeah, it's questionable how he became in possession of her comb and stuff like that, but that might be explained away too. His life also was just as dysfunctional as hers. Yes. He lived in his mother's basement till he was 45. His wife passed away from a drug overdose. And I asked one of his relatives, hey, what do you think about this beer thing? He goes, I wouldn't doubt it. He did crazy shit like that. He was different. Do I think so? And I asked this teacher, I said, let me ask you a question. Do you think that Robert Simpson killed her? And what would it have mattered if anybody said yes? Even if somebody in his family said, yeah, he killed her. What are you going to do to him? Dig him up? What are you going to do to any of them?
Right. He passed away only a few years ago, right?
Right. They're all deceased. And that's what kind of infuriates me about this case. Why are all these? There are students that know exactly what happened.
You think so?
And this bullshit of, we become born again Christians. No, you're not. You're going to hell because you're lying about this shit. You're going to hell. So don't even try that crap on me. And then
it seems like both of you think there's a lot of people involved in this case that know a lot more than they're saying.
I think they know there's. I don't think it's a case like a criminal case. I think she just wanted to get the hell out of there. But they know. But like their loyalty. Come on. You know what? Grow the hell up. Your loyalty. Just tell us what happened, and that's it. Nobody's going to jail because all the people of interest are dead.
The thing with Trenny is like she did come from a dysfunctional house, don't get me wrong, but she wasn't necessarily like an irresponsible girl either. I believe that if she wanted to run away, she probably would have planned better, like taken some money with her or something, kept a ring because at least she could have pawned it or something like that.
Hmm.
Uh, like I think that she had a little more sense than just to, oh, here I am, I want the fuck out of here, and get into a passing car and take off out of the park. I think that there was definitely some there would have been some planning involved if she wanted just to take off. The thing with Robert Simpson's, and I'm just going to call him Bobby because that's what his family called him. So I don't get him mixed up with Trenny's brother, who also went by Bob.
Yeah.
But Bobby Simpson, the thing with him is when he made that statement to Tina about, oh, if Calvin Bowman has Trenny, he'll kill her.
Yeah.
Or if he doesn't, well, I guess she just ran off with some horny hitchhiker then. To me, when he stated that, it almost sounds to me like it's the kind of the sour grapes thing, where somebody didn't get what they wanted or whatever, so now they're trying to turn it around and make it to kind of look like the other person needs to be discredited somehow.
Hmm.
What I think is possible that might have happened, and I mean, I wasn't there, but Trenny and Robert Simpson, or Bobby, they hiked up to Andrews Bald. Everything was fine. They ate their lunch. They looked around, and then maybe something happened. Like nothing necessarily physical, because Trenny didn't have a mark on her or anything. But we don't know. Maybe Bobby suggested something like, hey, let's go over here and do this or whatever. Maybe he said something suggestive to her, kind of thing. Maybe that pissed her off and she said, goodbye, Bob, or goodbye, Bobby. And then she left by herself. The other theory that's come up with the students, and I've been told this a handful of times by different Bearden alumni that were on the field trip, was Trenny was playing matchmaker. I
Yep.
don't know who between. Nobody wants to say who she was trying to match up. But apparently she was playing matchmaker. She was walking down the hill. She talked to one person, then go walk ahead, talk to this other person to tell them what the first person said, then walk back to tell the first person what the second person said, and so on and so forth. That's what they told me was happening that day. The other thing that's come up was I was told by Dwight McCarter that Trenny had a spat with her teacher. He didn't say over what. I don't know. I tried to speak to Mr. Dunlap. He would never grant me an interview. But according to Dwight McCarter, Trenny and Dunlap had a bit of a spat over something that day, and I don't know what it was about.
Hmm.
I think it had something to do with the fact that they were in the Smoky Mountains. Maybe Trenny didn't know that that's where they were going, so she didn't bring a coat. It was pissing rain that day. It was chilly out. Maybe she told Mr. Dunlap what she thought of his field trip.
Yeah, the fact that Mr. Dunlap kept the destination a mystery up until the day of is something that kind of stifles a lot of the theorizing here, because it's like, how could she have planned to run away when she didn't even know where she was going to go in the first place?
In interviewing the students, about half of them claimed that they knew where they were going.
There was talk.
And there was it. That's like a folk tale. The other half of them said no, they didn't know where they were going. They didn't find out till they were on the bus. They all got on the bus, and then that's when Mr. Dunlap came on the bus, announced where they were going. The kids were all excited, whistling, clapping, everything. According to them, Mr. Dunlap didn't say anything about the destination because he didn't want anybody followed up there. Like he didn't
Now,
want
What was Hope Gibson supposed to be a chaperone that day? Is that true?
Yeah. So she would have known.
So
That's
she
how
would have
Robert.
known, right?
That's how Bobby Gibson could have found out.
Right.
So it's not really far fetched that he would have known. We
That's
know,
pretty wild, actually, if you think about it. So
According
Hope
to Hope,
Gibson was going to be a chaperone, and then she
and she
wasn't.
bailed
And
out.
then it's
Yeah,
her daughter that goes missing.
yeah,
yeah,
yeah. So
what are the chances of that happening? But Hope Gibson claims they didn't know where Trenny was going. There was no permission slip. She just went up to the Smokies and disappeared, and that was the end of it.
yeah, that's what. Yeah,
Hope said that all she knew, well, Trenny wanted her mother to come along. This is according to Hope, but Hope's not told the truth about a lot of things. But Hope said that Trenny wanted her to come along. So Hope, thought that yeah, she'll go along. She had told the teacher that she would come along on the trip as a chaperone. That was great. All she said that she knew was the trip. They were going to be gone all day. So all of a sudden, then Hope said she couldn't go because she didn't have anybody to watch Miracle, Trenny's younger brother,
yeah,
when he came home after kindergarten or after school. There was no one to watch him. She tried to get a sitter. She couldn't find anybody. So she had to back out. And Trenny had thought, well, maybe she should just stay home as well, and kind of had some apprehension about going, according to Hope. Mr. Dunlap nonetheless decided, he was going to go on the trip and he was going to keep these 40 kids under control alone. And
yeah.
the bus driver was staying with the bus. That's what we knew. But like I said, Hope's lied about a lot of things. So maybe she did know they were going to Okies. Maybe Trenny did too. We don't know.
Well, so Mike,
Yeah.
it sounds like you lean a lot more towards the idea that she ran away than the idea that
Well,
she's subject to
that
foul
would kind
play.
of, and that would be kind of be a sad thing if she did, and I'll tell you why. I mean, it would be all well and fine that she's alive and lived a life and this and that. But what about people she put in positions that lived a whole lifetime being pointed out as the bad guy? Robert Simpson Jr.,
Mm.
Kelvin Bowman, who the hell else?
Dunlap,
Dwayne Dunlop, who had serious PTSD, and that was a bigger part of it. So there were more victims because of her not saying something. So really, who's the victim here?
Right.
I mean,
And
as far as we know, Kelvin Bowman and Robert Simpson could be the victims.
yeah.
Because look at anytime you open up a a new anything article, podcast, who's the first two people that are always mentioned? Kelvin Bowman, who didn't do it, who couldn't have done it, but you still have people pushing that trash. Simpson's a question mark.
Yeah, he had a history with Trenny, right? So yeah.
So Simpson's still a question mark, but based on physical evidence, I mean, she was still alive when she ran past the 6 kids. So, and nobody saw Simpson coming after her. So, but these people have become, pinnacle to the case. And the sad thing is, I don't think Calvin Bowman had anything to do with it.
Well, let me summarize what I'm kind of.
Well, after talking to him, he sounded like he cared more about her than some of her family members.
Right.
And that's sad.
It sounds
You
like
know, but
all this adds up to, and what you're telling me is that or maybe you guys both think this as well, that she had some sort of plan with some guy that she ran off with, and some of her classmates knew, but they didn't want to tell because they knew she had a bad
It wouldn't have been.
wanted to give her a chance.
Wouldn't it have been a perfect alibi? She left her identification and her wallet in her mother's car. She didn't take anything of money or anything in her house, because if she did, then they would have said, "Hey, it's a runaway." Or if she got stopped with a wallet down the road somewhere, oh yeah, okay, this is you.
Hmm.
It's a perfect storm. I mean, yeah,
Laura, Laura, how do you feel about it? Do you feel like she ran away, or do you feel like she was subject to foul play of some kind?
Um, I always was of the mind that Trenny is no longer with us,
Hmm.
and she she was subject to some sort of foul play. Whether or not it's classmate related remains to be seen. Although, like I've said, the classmates knew some things that if they were 100% innocent, they probably wouldn't know ordinarily. Would Trenny have had motive to run away if you sat down and looked at it? Yeah, probably. But to me, I think she would have ran away from a place that she was a little more familiar with, such as Knoxville. Maybe got the gentleman that she was seeing to come and get her or whatever. All she would have had to do is lie to her parents and say she had to work when she actually didn't, and get in the car with him and take off. The other thing is, if Trenny ran away with her boyfriend, she's missing, but the boyfriend doesn't seem to be.
Yeah,
Whoever he is doesn't seem to be missing. So that's why I tend more towards foul play, that something bad happened to her, and I believe she's long dead.
gotcha.
It would be wonderful if she were still alive, but as Michael pointed out, how many lives got affected by her disappearance? You have Calvin Bowman, who was always looked at as the jealous boyfriend that found a way to get to the park and rubbed her out. You have Robert Simpson, maybe did something to her, whatever. He had his father that could, cover his tracks, that sort of thing. Maybe that was like a sexually motivated crime. Um, you have Mr. Wayne Dunlap, um, that just wanted to take his horticulture students on this field trip by hook or by crook, and he ended up having a nervous breakdown. He had to leave teaching. He moved clear across the US to Oregon, where he stayed till 2007 before he moved back to Tennessee, because that's where a lot of his family lived. And it tragically affected his life. It cost him his job, potentially his marriage, because he and his first wife broke up shortly after Trenny disappeared. So you look at her brother Bob. Bob suffered with substance abuse and died at the young age of 42 after Trenny disappeared. Her sister struggled with addiction all her life as well, and died in her 50s of cancer. We could go on and on and on of all the people that were affected by this if Trenny ran away. Obviously, her mother Hope and her younger brother Miracle, as well. Yeah, just it goes on and on. It's a vast amount of people. So if she did that, pulled rank and buggered off, she destroyed a lot of people in the wake of doing so. But it
Yeah.
was absolutely a lot easier in the 1970s to disappear if you wanted to. You know, she could have easily got another social security number. They had the forms right at the post office. You could go fill out. It was very easy to live in the gaps in those days, kind of where one paper trail ended and another one started. So she could have had a new identity or whatever. I think that if that sort of thing happened at some point, she would have tried to come back, maybe contact her family, or if not her mother, potentially her cousins or her uncle Steve that was very close to her. He died in 1990. Um, I think she would have probably resurfaced.
Has anyone done, because I had the same thought that if she kind of ran away, maybe she'd get in touch with some of her siblings or family members that she did like. But have people really engaged them much in interviews to try and talk with them, or would they even be honest if you did? I wonder.
I don't think they'd be honest.
Mm.
I mean, look at the Gone girl, Joan Risch. She just disappeared, and we know for a fact that she wasn't a victim of anything.
Hmm.
She just one day up, left her 2 kids and her husband, and just never came back. Probably used a different name. I mean, people disappear every day. People disappear every day. People disappear every day. People disappear every day.
So there you have it. There's a lot more to this case than most people ever knew, but at the same time, it doesn't really get us any further in figuring out what happened. There were 2 potential suspects, Robert Simpson and Kelvin Bowman, but it seems like neither of them were directly involved. The only thing that seems evident is that Trenny Gibson left the Smoky Mountains the day she disappeared. I believe that to be true. If she was there, they would have found her. But besides that, we have pretty good scent evidence to show that she got picked up at the road. The question is, how could that happen? Was Trenny abducted by an unknown individual who was just out searching for the right opportunity and somehow found it? It seems unlikely. The scent trail leading to a road and parking lot before ending seems very intentional, like someone was there waiting for her. If Trenny was lost and found her way to a road, you would think that she would start walking along it until she made it back to the parking lot. Did her classmates know more than they told authorities? Possibly. Maybe a large number of kids did know where they were going for that field trip. Hope Gibson was supposed to be a chaperone after all. If Trenny knew where they were going, she could better plan out her escape if that was her goal. But who would be assisting her? That is another tough question to answer. At the same time, Trenny didn't seem very prepared for running away. She even forgot to bring a coat on the field trip. Both foul play and voluntary disappearance have holes of this fashion. In the end, it seems clear that there was a lot more going on in this teenager's life than even her parents knew. Given that, there's all sorts of possibilities that we could be unaware of. Ultimately, there really seems to be only 2 options in this case, and it all depends on who that person was that picked up Trenny at the road. Either it was some criminal with bad intentions, or it was someone trying to assist her with a voluntary disappearance. We may never know which of those 2 options is the correct one. Much like the other famous Smoky Mountains disappearance, which is Dennis Martin, the case of Trenny Gibson is much more complex than is often presented. I have to thank both Mike Bouchard and Laura Riste for their time and their diligent research. Without it, we would lack a lot of critical information that furthers our understanding of this case. If you would like to contact either of them about Trenny's disappearance, I will put their email addresses in the description of this video. Hopefully, this video has shed new light on the rather tragic case of Trenny Gibson, and please let me know what you think in the comments, and until next time, thanks for watching.